In 1938, deep in the arid outskirts of Baghdad, workers excavating an ancient village unearthed a small, unassuming clay jar. At first glance, it appeared to be no different from the countless pottery fragments scattered across Mesopotamia. But when archaeologists examined it more closely, they found something unusual. Inside was a tightly fitted copper cylinder, sealed with asphalt, and a corroded iron rod protruding from the center. To most, it looked like a forgotten storage container. To the few who studied it in depth, it looked like something impossible. A primitive electrical device, more than 2,000 years old. If you find this video valuable, please give us a like and subscribe to Dust Files and comment. This artifact would later become known as the Baghdad Battery. Its age alone was startling, dating back to the Parthian period, long before the era of modern science. But what unsettled historians was the function it seemed to hint at. When replicas of the jar were constructed and filled with acidic liquids like vinegar or lemon juice, they produced a small but consistent electrical charge. The principle was simple, yet the implications were staggering. If true, it meant that someone in ancient Mesopotamia understood how to generate and store electricity. This was not supposed to happen in history. Electricity, as far as textbooks were concerned, belonged to the genius of Benjamin Franklin, Alessandro Volta, and Michael Faraday, men of the 18th and 19th centuries. The Baghdad Battery challenged that neat, linear story. It suggested that over 2,000 years earlier, people may have stumbled upon, or perhaps fully understood, the principles of electrochemistry. The discovery was met with skepticism. Critics argued it could have been a storage vessel for scrolls, or perhaps a ritual object, its metal components purely decorative. Yet the corrosion patterns on the copper and iron suggested chemical reactions had taken place inside. These were not random materials placed together by accident. They had been chosen, shaped, and sealed in a way that mirrored the structure of a galvanic cell. As more attention turned to the artifact, whispers began to circulate among archaeologists and historians. If the Baghdad Battery was genuine, if it truly functioned as an energy device, then it raised a far more troubling question. Was this a lone invention, an isolated accident of history, or just one surviving fragment of a much larger technological tradition that had been lost? Clues emerged from the broader region. In the ruins of nearby Seleucia, researchers uncovered objects with suspiciously smooth, gold-plated surfaces. Gold plating is a process that requires a steady electric current, something this ancient battery could theoretically provide. In other parts of the Middle East, fragments of similar copper and iron assemblies began to surface, often ignored in museum storerooms, catalogued simply as metal vessels without further investigation. Yet this was not just a story about one jar. Across the ancient world, in places far from Mesopotamia, strange discoveries echoed the same theme, artifacts that didn't seem to belong to their time. In Egypt, temple reliefs showed bulb-shaped carvings connected to what resembled thick cables. In Greece, certain metallic tools bore microscopic precision marks, as if shaped by machinery requiring a controlled energy source. In China, writings from the Han Dynasty referenced lightning jars, said to be capable of healing wounds. These pieces didn't form a clear picture, but together they hinted that the Baghdad Battery might not be an anomaly at all. What unsettled scholars most was not simply the existence of this device, but the idea that it could point to a chapter of human history we no longer remembered, a chapter where knowledge of power, light, and electrochemistry might have been understood, applied, and then abruptly forgotten. For modern science, the narrative of technological progress has always been one of steady, upward movement. The battery in Baghdad whispered of something else entirely. Peaks of discovery, followed by valleys of loss. Theories began to branch in two directions. One group believed this was a case of serendipity. Ancient artisans experimenting with metals and acids might have accidentally created a functional power source without fully grasping the principles behind it. The other group argued for deliberate engineering, a purposeful design that required not only practical knowledge, but also an understanding of what electricity could do. The truth was buried somewhere between these extremes, and perhaps beneath layers of earth that had yet to be disturbed. But what could not be denied was that this object defied the timelines laid down by modern history books. It was older than any known documentation of electricity. It had no obvious connection to the technological web of the Industrial Revolution. And yet, it worked. Over the decades, the Baghdad Battery became both a curiosity and a cautionary tale in the study of ancient history. For those open to the idea, it served as a reminder that human ingenuity did not begin in the last few centuries. It stretched back into the dust and stone of forgotten civilizations. For the skeptics, it was a warning against over-interpreting archaeological finds, a lesson in how the human mind seeks patterns and connections, even when they may not be there. Still, whether accidental or intentional, the artifact's existence could not be erased. It sat in a museum in Baghdad for years, quietly challenging the boundaries of history, until war and looting in the early 2000s scattered much of Iraq's archaeological treasures. To this day, the original battery's whereabouts are uncertain. What remains are replicas, research notes, and a mystery that refuses to fade. The Baghdad Battery is not simply a relic. It is a crack in the wall of history, a glimpse into a version of the past that refuses to align neatly with our expectations. It invites us to consider that the people who lived thousands of years ago may have known things we have only recently rediscovered. And if that is true, then perhaps this jar is not the beginning of a mystery, but the final survivor of one. For decades after the discovery of the Baghdad Battery, the artifact was considered an oddity, a strange, isolated find. But history has a way of revealing patterns to those who know where to look. In time, other discoveries began to surface, scattered across continents, each one adding a small but significant piece to an unfolding puzzle. What emerged was a network of clues, buried in the sands of Egypt, carved into the stones of Greece, etched in Chinese scrolls, and even hidden in the jungles of South America. In the temple complex of Dendera, Egypt, a series of carvings depict what appear to be elongated bulb-like structures, with cords trailing back to box-shaped devices. To the casual eye, these are simply symbolic hieroglyphs. But to some engineers, the resemblance to a modern electric lamp is unnerving. The reliefs, dating back over 2,000 years, show figures holding these bulbous forms as though illuminating their surroundings. Critics claim they represent lotus flowers and serpents, a mythological motif. Yet the details, such as the coiled filament inside and the cord-like extensions, have sparked debates that refuse to settle. If these were indeed artistic interpretations of an ancient lighting system, they would require an energy source, and that source could have been something very much like the Baghdad Battery. Farther west, in the ruins of ancient Greece, archaeologists have unearthed metallic tools so precise that their surfaces show microscopic machining marks. This level of refinement suggests techniques far beyond what hammers and chisels alone could achieve. Gold plating on delicate statues, seamless metal joints, and chemical residues consistent with electroplating have been identified in workshops dating back to the Hellenistic era. These findings raise the possibility that Greek artisans had access to controlled electricity, not in the form of power grids or light bulbs, but as a tool for metallurgy and craftsmanship. In China, historical records from the Han Dynasty speak of thunder jars, sealed vessels said to contain the power of lightning. Descriptions are vague, perhaps intentionally, but certain passages describe their use in medical treatments, where small currents were applied to the body to stimulate healing. While no physical examples survive with certainty, a handful of excavated bronze vessels, lined with a strange green patina, have chemical profiles that suggest they once contained acidic liquids. Whether these were ritual objects or primitive batteries remains a matter of fierce debate. But perhaps the most unexpected evidence comes from across the ocean, in the highlands of South America. The Moche civilization of ancient Peru, flourishing between the 1st and 8th centuries CE, left behind finely crafted metalwork, thin sheets of gold fused to copper without solder. Modern analysis shows that such fusing could have been achieved through electrochemical processes remarkably similar to those used today. The Moche left no written record of their techniques, but the results speak for themselves. Craftsmanship that would challenge even a skilled modern artisan without access to advanced tools. Taken alone, each of these findings could be dismissed as coincidence or explained away as the result of symbolic art, accidental reactions, or lost methods unrelated to electricity. But together, they form a map, a set of recurring themes that suggest humanity may have understood and harnessed energy long before the official dawn of the electrical age. Across cultures that supposedly had no contact with one another, we find sealed vessels, unusual alloys, precision metalworking, and iconography hinting at devices that needed power to function. The real challenge lies in interpretation. Archaeology is cautious by nature. Scholars resist conclusions that lack irrefutable proof, and with good reason. The temptation to see modern technology in ancient relics is strong, yet patterns persist. The copper and iron assemblies of Mesopotamia echo in the patinated vessels of China. The possible glass bulbs of Egypt reflect in the metallurgical achievements of Greece and Peru. There is a rhythm to these discoveries, as though each culture stumbled upon similar principles, applied them for its own needs, and then, for reasons unknown, abandoned them. Some researchers have proposed that these devices, if they were indeed energy sources, were not used for large-scale applications like powering cities. Instead, they may have been specialty tools, instruments for religious ceremonies, delicate manufacturing processes, or even early forms of medical therapy. This would explain why no remnants of power networks have been found. In a world without an industrial framework, electricity might have been an occasional wonder, reserved for elite artisans or priests, not a resource for the masses. Yet, even if their use was limited, the knowledge required to create such devices was anything but trivial. It demanded an understanding of materials, chemistry, and design that should not have existed in these eras, at least according to the official story. How did cultures separated by oceans and centuries arrive at similar solutions? Was it parallel invention born of human curiosity, or the remnants of a shared legacy stretching back to an even older, forgotten source? The sands and stones of these ancient sites hold no easy answers. What they do hold are tantalizing fragments of a narrative that refuses to fit neatly within the pages of conventional history. A clay jar in Iraq, a carved stone in Egypt, a patinated vessel in China, a fused gold-copper ornament in Peru. Each one is a whisper from the past, faint but insistent, urging us to reconsider what we think we know about human capability. As more of these artifacts come to light, a larger picture begins to take shape, not of primitive peoples fumbling toward modernity, but of sophisticated cultures that achieved feats we are only beginning to understand. Whether by chance or by design, they touched upon a form of energy that would vanish for centuries, leaving behind only traces in the sand. When an ancient artifact is unearthed, its mystery is often hidden not in its shape, but in its substance. The real story lies deep in the metal, in the chemical signatures left behind by long-vanished hands. And sometimes, those signatures simply should not exist. In 1938, when Wilhelm Koenig examined the now famous Baghdad Battery, his attention wasn't fixed solely on its clay shell or copper cylinder. It was the purity of the copper, the precision of the fit, and the traces of lead solder that startled him. Lead solder with a melting point requiring sustained, controlled heat was not a material easily managed by the rudimentary furnaces we're told existed at the time. Yet here it was, neatly applied, still bonding the metals after 2,000 years in the earth. Similar anomalies had been detected in artifacts across the globe. In a workshop site near the ancient city of Ur, fragments of tools were found coated in an ultra-thin layer of silver, so smooth and even that modern metallurgists compare it to electroplating. The process to achieve such a finish requires precise current control, something that shouldn't have been possible before the 19th century. But chemical analysis of the coating shows it was not hammered or welded. It was deposited, molecule by molecule, through a process still used in modern electronics manufacturing. Egypt offers another enigma. Deep within the tombs of Saqqara, copper fittings have been recovered that contain traces of arsenic bronze, a strong, corrosion-resistant alloy. Creating it demands careful blending of copper with arsenic-rich ores under conditions that prevent oxidation. In the open-air furnaces of the time, arsenic would simply burn off, making such alloys a rarity in ancient metallurgy. And yet, here they are, surviving thousands of years with minimal degradation, as if their makers understood and mastered a technique lost to history. Then there's the curious case of an ancient coin from the Greek island of Lesbos. Dated to around 600 BCE at first glance, it appeared to be pure nickel, a metal notoriously difficult to refine, even with today's technology. Natural nickel deposits usually contain high levels of iron, making the creation of pure nickel almost impossible without modern smelting methods. Yet analysis showed the coin to be over 99% pure, suggesting not only advanced metallurgy, but also an understanding of extraction techniques far beyond the reach of their contemporaries. Perhaps the most striking example comes from the Chavín culture of the Andes. Centuries before the rise of the Inca, archaeologists recovered ceremonial knives, tumi, crafted from a gold-copper alloy called tumbaga. What's remarkable is not the alloy itself, but the surface treatment, a process called depletion gilding, in which the copper is leached out from the surface layer, leaving a thin skin of nearly pure gold. This results in a brilliant, corrosion-resistant finish. It's a technique requiring precise control of chemical reactions, heat, and timing, knowledge that should have been inaccessible to pre-Columbian societies, yet it was clearly mastered. When studied under modern microscopes, many of these artifacts reveal microscopic striations, pitting, and layering that match methods we associate with electrochemical or industrial-level refinement. In some cases, metallurgists have recreated the alloys using only the tools and techniques officially available at the time, and failed. The implication is difficult to ignore. These cultures possessed not just the theory, but the technical skill to manipulate materials in ways we are only beginning to understand. Skeptics often point to natural processes as explanations. They argue that impurities in ores could account for strange compositions, or that natural electrochemical reactions might mimic the effects of electroplating. But these arguments falter when the same anomalies appear across different continents in cultures that supposedly never shared contact. When highly refined nickel appears in Greece, depletion-gilded gold in Peru, and arsenic bronze in Egypt, coincidence begins to strain credibility. What makes these findings even more unsettling is their context. Many of these materials were used not for everyday objects, but for ceremonial or high-status purposes, suggesting that their creators understood their value, perhaps even their unique properties. A gilded tumi was not simply decorative. Its corrosion resistance ensured it could survive for generations. Electroplated silver on a Sumerian tool wasn't just for shine. It made the surface harder and more resistant to wear. The technical choices seem deliberate, targeted, and intelligent. It's tempting to think of these ancient metallurgists as early scientists, experimenting, refining, and perfecting methods over centuries. But some of these techniques appear fully formed in the archaeological record, with no obvious developmental stages. One era shows no sign of the method, and the next presents artifacts of near-modern precision. Then, just as suddenly, the technique vanishes, leaving future generations unable to replicate it. Why would such valuable knowledge disappear? War, societal collapse, or natural disasters could wipe out skilled artisans. Trade routes could vanish, cutting off access to rare materials. Or perhaps the techniques were guarded secrets, known only to a select few, and lost when their keepers died. Whatever the reason, the result is the same: an entire chapter of technological mastery torn from human history. Today, laboratories continue to test these artifacts with the most advanced tools available. Electron microscopes, spectroscopy, and isotopic analysis peel back layers of history atom by atom. Yet with every breakthrough comes another mystery. The more we learn about the materials our ancestors used, the less primitive they appear. Across continents and centuries, the pattern holds. These were not the crude, haphazard efforts of a trial-and-error society. They were the work of craftspeople who understood their materials intimately and who possessed knowledge that should have been centuries out of reach. Their creations, buried under soil and stone, still whisper a truth that history books struggle to explain. The past was not as simple as we've been taught. When ancient artifacts are spoken of in hushed, speculative tones, it is often because no one can prove how they worked, or if they worked at all. But over the past few decades, that uncertainty has been chipped away. Researchers, engineers, and even curious hobbyists have taken these enigmatic devices from behind museum glass and placed them back into the realm of experimentation. The results have been nothing short of astonishing. The most famous example remains the Baghdad Battery. In the early 1930s, this unassuming clay jar, copper cylinder, and iron rod puzzled archaeologists. Decades later, modern scientists built faithful replicas and filled them with various electrolytes, vinegar, grape juice, even copper sulfate. To their surprise, the device produced a measurable electric current, sometimes up to 1 volt. Not enough to power a light bulb, but enough to electroplate a thin layer of metal onto another object. This single test shifted the narrative from speculation to possibility. In the 1970s, Dr. Arne Eggebrecht, director of the Pelizaeus Museum in Hildesheim, Germany, decided to test that possibility further. Using his own reconstructed Baghdad batteries connected in series, he successfully electroplated a thin layer of gold onto a silver statue. The process was slow, but undeniably effective, a tangible link between ancient technology and a practical industrial process. It suggested that the ornate gildings seen on certain Mesopotamian artifacts might not have been purely decorative, but achieved through controlled electrical methods. Egypt, too, has yielded curious experiments. Replicas of so-called dendrolite reliefs, stone carvings that some claim depict a large bulb-like device, were tested using low-voltage electrical currents. While the mainstream explanation remains symbolic art, experiments have shown that similar-shaped glass vessels, when connected to a small current source like the Baghdad Battery, can indeed produce a faint glow. Whether or not this was the ancient intention, the physics works, raising uncomfortable questions about the breadth of ancient experimentation. In South America, researchers examining the golden masks and jewelry of the Moshe and Chevin cultures have replicated their corrosion-resistant finishes through modern depletion gilding techniques. But here's where it gets strange. The most effective modern method to achieve the exact surface patterns seen on these artifacts involves using a mild electrochemical bath, essentially running a low current through the metal in a chemical solution. This has led some metallurgists to suspect that ancient goldsmiths were not just working by fire and hammer, but by harnessing a force far less visible. Even more unsettling is the evidence from ancient medical practices. Texts from Greece, Rome, and even older cultures reference the use of electric fish to numb pain or treat ailments. In controlled experiments, scientists have replaced the living fish with small galvanic cells modeled on ancient designs. When applied to muscle or nerve points, these cells can produce mild numbing effects, consistent with what ancient healers described. The idea that ancient technology could extend into the realm of medicine suggests a far deeper understanding of the body and natural forces than our textbooks usually allow. Modern engineers have also considered the possibility that such devices could have served as primitive sensors. A small, continuous current can be used to detect changes in conductivity, which could help identify impurities in metal, test water quality, or even act as an early warning system for environmental hazards. This is speculative, but when you hold a replica of an ancient galvanic cell in your hands, you can't help but wonder if its creators had already stumbled upon such principles. One of the most intriguing experiments came from a team of electrical engineers in 2006. Using multiple Baghdad Battery replicas wired together, they managed to power a small, low-energy LED for several minutes. While LEDs did not exist in antiquity, the test revealed that scaling up the number of cells could have allowed ancient engineers to achieve far more than we assume, perhaps lighting sacred chambers or powering devices whose remains have yet to be discovered. What stands out in all of these modern trials is how consistently the ancient designs work. These are not coincidental shapes or random assemblages of materials. They are deliberate constructions that, when rebuilt faithfully, behave exactly as the laws of physics dictate they should. And while the voltage and current are modest by today's standards, they are more than enough for electroplating, chemical processing, or delivering therapeutic electrical pulses. Mainstream historians often argue that these similarities are coincidental, that ancient people stumbled upon functional designs without understanding the science. But those who have handled these reconstructions find it difficult to believe such precision came by accident. The ratios of material, the insulating properties of the containers, the corrosion-resistant coatings on conductors, all hint at intentional design. The most uncomfortable implication is not that ancient peoples harnessed electricity, but that they may have understood it as a tool, applied with skill to multiple domains: industry, medicine, ritual, and perhaps even architecture. If this is true, then the absence of widespread evidence for these practices is not because they never existed, but because their traces have been erased by time, decay, and the selective preservation of history. Every modern replication brings us closer to bridging the gap between what we think we know and what the evidence suggests. And in that narrowing gap, a new image of the ancient world is emerging, one where power was not only symbolic, but literal. Across the ancient world, the walls of temples, tombs, and palaces tell stories carved in stone and painted in vivid color. To most historians, these are symbols, metaphors for gods, cosmic forces, and spiritual beliefs. Yet some of these images seem to hint at something far more tangible, something mechanical, almost industrial. The question is whether we are looking at art or at the memory of a forgotten technology. The most famous of these is the Dendra Light, a series of reliefs carved into the crypts beneath the Temple of Hathor in Egypt. At first glance, it appears to depict a lotus flower from which emerges a serpent inside an elongated oval shape, connected to a base resembling a pillar. But to modern eyes, especially those familiar with electrical diagrams, the shape bears an uncanny resemblance to a bulb with a filament, connected by a thick cable to a power source. Skeptics dismiss this as a coincidence, insisting it's a symbolic representation of creation and energy in a spiritual sense. Yet when engineers have reconstructed the shape as an actual light source using ancient-style galvanic cells, the resemblance feels less coincidental and more like a coded diagram left for those who could understand it. Egypt is not the only civilization with such enigmatic imagery. In the ruins of Abydos, hieroglyphics depict what appear to be objects startlingly similar to helicopters, submarines, and other advanced machines. Official explanations claim these shapes are the result of overlapping carvings from different eras, but the precision of certain forms keeps the debate alive. Even if some can be explained away as chance, not all such carvings fall neatly into coincidence. Travel east, and you find similar motifs in the temples of India, where ancient sculptures sometimes show figures holding what appear to be small, portable devices with handles and rounded tops. Some historians interpret these as ritual items, but others see parallels to high-voltage electrical insulators or even early capacitor shapes. The descriptions in certain Sanskrit texts only deepen the intrigue, mentioning tools that could store the essence of thunder and channel the fire of the heavens. In Mesoamerica, the murals of Teotihuacan and other ancient cities occasionally feature depictions of coils, spirals, and geometric forms that seem to mirror the shapes of electromagnetic devices. While mainstream archaeology insists these are purely artistic patterns, the recurrence of similar shapes across continents raises questions about shared knowledge, or at least a shared memory of a universal concept of power. One of the most striking patterns is how these symbols often appear in sacred spaces, underground chambers, temples, and ceremonial platforms. This suggests that if these devices existed, they were not for everyday use, but reserved for rituals, perhaps guarded as the most sacred knowledge of the elite. In many ancient cultures, the priestly class held both spiritual and practical power, controlling calendars, agriculture, and possibly the means to harness natural forces. Technology, if it existed, may have been cloaked in religious symbolism to keep it hidden from the masses. The blending of the symbolic and the practical would have been a powerful strategy. By embedding the memory of technology within art and myth, ancient societies could pass on the essence of a design without exposing its full function. A carving could be a prayer to the gods to the uninitiated, but to those with the knowledge, it could be an instruction manual in plain sight. Consider the spirals carved into megalithic structures from Newgrange Island to the temples of Malta. While often interpreted as solar or lunar symbols, spirals also represent the geometry of magnetic fields, electrical coils, and energy flow. Could this recurring motif be more than a coincidence? Could it be a visual code, repeated across millennia to preserve a technical concept? And then there is the matter of proportions. Some of these ancient images, when measured, reveal ratios consistent with modern engineering principles. The golden ratio, precise symmetry, and scale relationships that would be functional in an actual device. The Dendra relief, for example, matches certain proportions found in early vacuum tubes and experimental electrostatic devices. Again, the orthodox explanation is artistic skill, but art that accidentally mirrors functional technology again and again strains belief. Whether these carvings and paintings were literal depictions of devices or symbolic representations of abstract forces, the fact remains, they resonate with the forms of known technology. They challenge the linear timeline of human progress we have been taught. If ancient peoples encoded their technology into sacred art, then much of what we dismiss as myth may actually be a record of real, practical achievements. These symbols are not just decorations. They are messages from a world that may have understood power, in both the physical and metaphysical sense, far better than we give it credit for. Throughout history, there are moments when progress halts without warning, not in a slow decline, but in a sudden, catastrophic silence. In the study of ancient technology, these moments are even more haunting. Across different civilizations, there are traces of sophisticated craftsmanship, strange artifacts, and inexplicable symbols. And then, suddenly, nothing. The trail stops cold, as if the people who made them had vanished, or their knowledge had been deliberately erased. One of the clearest examples lies in the ruins of Alexandria. The Great Library was more than a storehouse of scrolls. It was a repository of human achievement. Some historians believe it held manuscripts describing mechanical marvels, astronomical devices, and perhaps even electrical knowledge. When the library burned, whether through Julius Caesar's siege, later decrees, or accidental fire, it wasn't just paper that turned to ash. It was memory. Whole branches of knowledge, painstakingly accumulated over centuries, may have been lost in a single night. In Mesopotamia, ancient workshops once linked to curious artifacts like the so-called Baghdad Battery disappear from the archaeological record just as quickly as they appear. Layers of war-destroyed cities, Akkad, Ur, Nineveh, Kello, the story of civilizations toppled in days, their craftsmen scattered, their tools abandoned. Whatever they had been working on, it did not survive the collapse. It is not hard to imagine that fragile devices, built with materials meant to conduct or store energy, would be among the first casualties of war, dismantled for scrap or simply forgotten as survival took precedence. Natural disasters, too, have left their silent fingerprints. The eruption of Thera, the earthquakes that shattered the Indus Valley cities, the floods that swept through China's ancient heartlands, each event tore apart communities, killing not just people, but their accumulated expertise. Even in the modern age, technological knowledge is vulnerable. Without constant use and transmission, it fades in a generation. In antiquity, where much depended on oral teaching and the guarded secrecy of guilds or priesthoods, a single catastrophe could erase centuries of progress. But there is another possibility, one that casts a longer shadow. Some records suggest that certain ancient technologies were deliberately suppressed. In Mesoamerica, Spanish chroniclers noted that native codices were burned en masse, erasing knowledge deemed heretical or dangerous. In the Middle East, Islamic historians wrote of older, pagan sciences being destroyed or hidden away after conquest. And in medieval Europe, the Inquisition actively sought out and eliminated what it called forbidden arts. If ancient power sources existed, they may have been targeted not because they failed, but because they threatened existing structures of control. The pattern is disturbingly consistent. In the centuries after these abrupt disappearances, we see not a slow evolution of the technology, but a complete absence. The supposed precursors to electricity vanish from the record, replaced by simpler tools, more primitive craftsmanship, and an emphasis on purely symbolic rather than functional devices. It is as if a light had been switched off, not just literally, but in the minds of entire cultures. In many cases, the locations where such artifacts were found also share a common fate. Temples buried beneath new structures, workshops repurposed for religious rituals, inscriptions erased or overwritten. These were not random acts of nature or war. They look instead like deliberate steps to seal away knowledge, to prevent it from resurfacing. Whether this was to protect the technology from misuse or to monopolize its power for a chosen few, we may never know. What is certain is that once the lights went out, the darkness endured for centuries. Whatever devices once hummed or glowed in the hands of ancient engineers, they left behind only their shadows, carved in stone, whispered in myth, or buried deep in the ruins of a world that once, briefly, knew more than we can imagine. Across the globe, there are places where time seems to have stopped, sealed doors in ancient temples, untouched chambers deep within caves, and ruins that have lain dormant for thousands of years. Behind these barriers may lie relics from a forgotten chapter of human history. If the ancient power sources once existed, perhaps they were not all destroyed. Perhaps some were hidden away, preserved in the shadows, waiting for a future that never came. In Egypt, certain temple complexes have corridors that lead to walled-off chambers. Archaeologists debate whether these were simply unfinished rooms or intentional vaults, sealed to protect sacred treasures. Ancient writings hint that priests safeguarded objects of the gods, away from the common people, devices said to hold the energy of the sun or the power of lightning. The Dendra temple itself has substructures yet to be fully explored, where inscriptions speak of gifts not for the eyes of the uninitiated. Could such words have been a literal warning about dangerous, misunderstood technology? Far to the east, in India's Ajana and Ellora cave complexes, local legends speak of sleeping treasures buried beneath the stone. Inscriptions carved centuries after their sealing speak of guardianship, curses, and forbidden knowledge. These caves are architectural marvels in themselves, but their most intriguing features are the sealed alcoves, too perfectly closed to be mere collapses, as though someone intended them to remain untouched for eternity. The Andes Mountains of Peru hold another mystery. In the ruins of Ollantaytambo and Sacsayhuaman, archaeologists have documented enormous precision-cut stones, some forming door-like niches that lead nowhere. Local Quichua oral traditions tell of gates, once used by the ancient builders, closed when the time of light had ended. While these could be poetic references, the consistency of such tales across different regions raises the possibility that these were deliberate closures, physical and symbolic acts to shut away something powerful. Even in more recent centuries, there are accounts of monarchs and religious leaders locking away technological artifacts. Medieval chronicles from the Middle East describe rulers hiding ancient devices in fortified vaults, fearing their misuse. In China, some imperial records detail the sealing of heavenly mechanisms after the death of certain emperors, never to be opened again. The intention seems clear. Power, once obtained, could not be allowed to drift into uncontrolled hands. Modern exploration has occasionally brought us to the threshold of these sealed worlds, only to turn us back. In the Great Pyramid, robotic probes have found doors deep within hidden shafts, but these doors remain unopened, blocked by stone or metal. In South America, LiDAR scans have revealed entire complexes beneath dense jungle, still untouched. We can map their outlines, but whatever lies inside remains beyond our reach. And in every case, we are left with the same haunting thought. If these places were sealed, it was not by accident. Someone long ago made the decision to lock something away from the rest of humanity. These deliberate acts of concealment suggest two possibilities. Either these ancient people feared the dangers of their own technology, or they intended to keep its advantages for a select few, perhaps for a prophesied time when the knowledge could be safely restored. Both scenarios hint at a level of awareness far beyond what we usually attribute to ancient civilizations. They understood the value of knowledge, but also its potential to destroy. The deeper we study these sealed chambers and hidden vaults, the more they remind us that history is not just a record of what we have discovered. It is also a record of what has been hidden from us. And somewhere, perhaps beneath a temple floor, inside a forgotten mountain tunnel, or behind an unbroken wall, an ancient power source may still rest in perfect darkness, exactly as it was left, untouched for thousands of years. Throughout history, there have been those who carried the weight of secrets too dangerous or too valuable to share. They were the custodians of ancient wisdom, the silent inheritors of knowledge that could alter the course of civilization. Their names rarely appear in the pages of mainstream history, yet their influence lingers in cryptic manuscripts, strange architectural motifs, and oral traditions passed down like treasures in the dark. In the temples of ancient Egypt, the high priests were not merely religious figures. They were scientists, engineers, and keepers of technology. Papyrus scrolls describe instruments of Ra and houses of energy, written in a coded language that only the initiated could interpret. While most worshippers saw only ritual and symbol, the priesthood saw practical devices, formulas, and construction plans, the blueprints of a power source they swore to protect. Thousands of miles away in Mesoamerica, the Mayan Itza priesthood held similar responsibilities. Glyphs on temple walls depict what appear to be coils, spheres, and conduits, often surrounded by symbols of lightning or the sun. When the Spanish conquest threatened their civilization, these priests committed their knowledge to memory, passing it down in guarded fragments that still surface in indigenous oral history today. The medieval world had its own guardians. After the fall of ancient Rome, much of Europe descended into an age where knowledge was fragmented and jealously guarded. In secluded monasteries, monks copied strange diagrams into the margins of religious texts, geometric shapes that modern researchers compared to circuit schematics or magnetic field patterns. These drawings were often dismissed as artistic flourishes, yet they bear uncanny resemblance to designs found in far older cultures. In the Islamic Golden Age, scholars in Baghdad's House of Wisdom translated ancient Greek, Persian, and Indian manuscripts. Some of these contained hints of devices capable of harnessing unseen forces. Alchemists like Jabir ibn Hayyan spoke of hidden fire and celestial influence in ways that suggest they were describing more than chemical reactions. The secrecy surrounding these writings was intentional. Not every student was deemed worthy of the complete truth. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of these knowledge keepers is how their traditions seem to echo each other across continents and millennia. The Egyptian priest describing a vessel of divine current speaks in parallel to a Chinese court engineer detailing the light of the heavens captured in bronze. Neither could have met the other, yet the conceptual overlap is unmistakable. This suggests not an isolated invention, but a legacy, a thread of understanding that wove itself through the fabric of human history, kept alive by a select few. These guardians were not only preserving their culture's achievements, but also ensuring that the knowledge did not vanish completely when empires fell and cities burned. The method of preservation varied. Some embedded the information in allegories and myth, hiding function within fable. Others used architectural alignments, encoding principles into the very stones of temples and pyramids. A few risked inscribing their knowledge directly, cloaking it in symbolic or religious language to escape destruction by those who might misunderstand or fear it. Yet secrecy has its price. As generations passed, fragments of the truth became distorted, reduced to legend, or lost entirely. The guardians could not control the chaos of war, the decay of time, or the shifting priorities of rulers. And so today, we are left with tantalizing shards, scattered pieces of a once coherent whole, preserved against impossible odds, whispering of a technology that might have rivaled our own. If these knowledge keepers had not existed, the trail of ancient power might have ended in silence. But because of them, we have clues. And with each decoded manuscript, each translated inscription, and each rediscovered artifact, we step closer to seeing the full picture they worked so hard to protect. Sometimes, the past comes back not as a deliberate find, but as an accident. History has a strange way of repeating itself, especially when it comes to innovation. Over the last few centuries, scientists and inventors have stumbled upon techniques that our ancestors may have mastered long before we imagined, reviving processes buried under layers of time, dust, and disbelief. In 1800, Alessandro Volta unveiled his famous voltaic pile, often credited as the first true battery in modern history. Yet, when archaeologists unearthed the so-called Baghdad Battery in the 1930s, a small clay jar with a copper cylinder and iron rod, they realized that someone may have beaten Volta to the punch by more than 2,000 years. Experiments revealed it could generate a weak electric current when filled with an acidic solution. The similarity to Volta's design was too striking to dismiss as coincidence. Had humanity simply rediscovered what was once everyday knowledge? Metallurgy tells a similar story. In the early 20th century, scientists examining ancient Indian statues found traces of a corrosion-resistant iron that baffled modern engineers. The famous Iron Pillar of Delhi, standing for over 1,600 years without rusting, displayed metallurgical precision that industrial technology supposedly only achieved in the last century. It wasn't until the late 1900s that metallurgists began replicating this durability, and even then, only by carefully studying the ancient alloy's crystalline structure. Another rediscovery came in the 1800s when electroplating, the process of coating objects in a thin layer of metal using electricity, became popular in Europe. Factories celebrated it as a modern marvel, but archaeologists noted artifacts from ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia bearing microscopic evidence of similar plating. If true, this would mean that civilizations thousands of years ago had the tools and knowledge to manipulate materials at a molecular level. The pattern is unsettling. Again and again, breakthroughs we credit to modern progress echo something older, something already tested and perfected in forgotten eras. Sometimes these parallels are direct. Other times they emerge in subtle, almost hidden ways. In the mid-20th century, Soviet researchers investigating ancient Scythian burial mounds uncovered gold artifacts so pure they exceeded the capabilities of early modern refining. The method, high-temperature smelting in oxygen-controlled chambers, was something that 20th century metallurgy only rediscovered with advanced equipment. Even architecture bears these echoes. The acoustic properties of certain ancient temples, like the Hypogeum of Cal, Saflieni in Malta, or the Mayan ball courts, were replicated by modern engineers only after costly trials. These structures could amplify and modulate sound in ways our technology initially struggled to reproduce, suggesting an intentional design that married physics with cultural function. The most fascinating part? Many of these rediscoveries weren't the result of chasing ancient secrets at all. They were stumbled upon while solving unrelated problems. A chemist seeking a better industrial coating might find himself recreating an ancient metallurgical formula. An engineer experimenting with conductivity might unwittingly echo the principles of an artifact buried in a museum basement. The past, it seems, keeps whispering its knowledge through the hands of the curious. And each time we rediscover such a technique, we are faced with a choice: to treat it as a coincidence, or to admit that perhaps our ancestors knew more than we've given them credit for. Piece by piece, experiment by experiment, we're rebuilding a mosaic of human capability that suggests technological sophistication is not a straight upward climb, but a repeating cycle of rise, fall, and rebirth. Some might call it a coincidence. Others might call it proof of a hidden legacy. But one thing is clear: the line between innovation and rediscovery is far thinner than we've been taught to believe. Time is not kind to memory. Civilizations rise like great fires, burning bright with knowledge, innovation, and vision, only to be reduced to embers and then to ash. What remains is often scattered: fragments of pottery, corroded metal, broken inscriptions, the faint echo of a song that no one alive knows the words to anymore. Yet, buried within these remains are whispers of something greater: technologies, techniques, and understandings that challenge everything we think we know about the human timeline. Across thousands of years, we've found them. Artifacts that should not exist. Objects whose composition mocks the limits we place on ancient ingenuity. Strange illustrations etched into temple walls, hinting at energy, illumination, and mechanical precision in an age we call primitive. We've unearthed batteries older than the word battery itself. Metals that have resisted decay for centuries without any of the chemical treatments we depend on today. Architectural feats so exact that modern tools barely replicate their precision. And yet, for every incredible find, there is a sobering truth: these are just the survivors. Most of the knowledge that birthed them is gone, not misplaced, not hidden in some library that we simply haven't opened yet. Gone, burned in fires that devoured scrolls and codices, buried under cities that sank into the sea, shattered in wars where conquering armies erased not only the people they defeated, but the very memory of their capabilities. The Library of Alexandria is the most famous symbol of this loss, a beacon of human curiosity turned to smoke. But it was far from unique. The Mayan codices, filled with astronomical data and mathematical records, were thrown into flames by conquistadors who saw them as heresy. The bronze mechanical gears of Antikythera survived only because they rested in the sea's cold darkness for 2,000 years. Countless others likely dissolved into dust long before we could recover them. In the deserts of the Middle East, entire ancient workshops have been reduced to indistinct ruins by centuries of wind and sand, their tools corroded beyond recognition. And yet, despite the scale of this destruction, The clues that remain suggest something profound. Humanity's technological journey is not a straight upward line. It is cyclical. It rises, peaks, and collapses, only to rise again. The same discoveries are made, lost, and made again. The Baghdad Battery, rediscovered in the 20th century, might have been common in its time. The rust-proof metallurgy of ancient India may have been part of a wider, now forgotten tradition. The precision of Incan stonework could have been one of many engineering marvels in a knowledge system we no longer understand. The fragility of human knowledge lies not just in its physical form, papyrus, parchment, clay, but in its dependence on context. An invention is not just an object. It is a network of skills, cultural needs, and supporting infrastructure. Remove one link and the rest collapses. A society that loses its scribes loses not only its written history, but its technical manuals, its architectural blueprints, its mathematical formulas. The knowledge might still exist in the minds of a few individuals, but without the means to preserve and teach it, it evaporates within a generation. We, in our modern age, like to believe we are immune to such loss. Our knowledge is backed up on servers, duplicated in cloud storage, archived in countless copies across the globe. But this confidence rests on a fragile foundation: electricity, stable governments, functioning infrastructure. A long enough collapse, and our so-called indestructible data becomes unreadable strings on dead machines. We would be left, like our ancestors, to rebuild with whatever fragments remain. What makes this reflection haunting is not just the loss itself, but the possibility that our ancestors may have reached technological heights equal to or beyond what we have today in certain domains, and that those achievements have been almost entirely erased. The precision-cut granite blocks of Puma Punku, the astronomical alignments of megalithic structures scattered across continents, the evidence of surgical techniques in ancient skulls that match modern methods of trepanation. The signs are faint, but they form a pattern. Yet, there is another layer to this mystery: the deliberate erasure. Throughout history, knowledge has often been hoarded, restricted, or destroyed, not by accident, but by choice. Powerful rulers have sealed chambers, hidden scrolls, or dismantled devices to ensure that only a select few could wield their benefits. Priests guarded sacred rituals that might have contained technical secrets. Empires dismantled the inventions of conquered peoples to prevent rebellion. Even in the modern era, discoveries have been classified, locked away in archives, or dismissed in academic circles to protect established narratives. This leaves us in a strange position. The artifacts we uncover are like single pages torn from books whose language we can barely read. We reconstruct what we can, filling in the gaps with experiment and speculation, but the full story remains beyond our grasp. And the more we find, the more the boundaries between ancient history and modern innovation blur. What would it mean if the light bulb was not first conceived in the 19th century, but millennia earlier? If electroplating was not a Renaissance marvel, but a Bronze Age craft? If our so-called modern material science was in some ways a revival of techniques already perfected and lost? The deeper we dig, the more these questions emerge, and the harder they are to dismiss. They challenge the comforting notion of linear progress, forcing us to see human history as something far more turbulent and fragile. It is not the steady march of civilization, but a precarious dance on the edge of forgetting. One truth becomes undeniable: if such technologies existed before, they may exist again, and perhaps somewhere still exist now, hidden in sealed chambers beneath temples swallowed by the earth, locked inside the tombs of rulers who feared the misuse of power, encased in ice, deep in the polar regions, waiting for climate or chance to reveal them. The earth is vast, and we have explored only a fraction of it. Each rediscovery, whether a battery, a surgical technique, or a forgotten alloy, is a thread. Alone, it is intriguing. Together, They form a tapestry that tells us not only about the brilliance of the past, but about our own fragility in the face of time. And in that understanding, there is a warning. If knowledge can be lost so easily, then what we hold today is not guaranteed for tomorrow. The devices in our hands, the networks we rely on, the medical techniques that save lives, all of it rests on an unbroken chain of understanding. Break that chain, and the light goes out. And so, beneath the dust of time, there may still lie the remnants of other ancient technologies, untouched, unbroken, and waiting. Not myths, not fantasies, but real physical echoes of human ingenuity, sealed away by the very forces that erased their memory. Perhaps the greatest discoveries are not the ones we have made, but the ones we have yet to uncover. In the end, the most haunting thought is not that we might find them. It is that, if we do, we may be forced to face the possibility that our ancestors were not so different from us, driven by curiosity, capable of brilliance, but always standing on the fragile edge of forgetting. And if the dust were to settle once again, what would we leave behind for those who come after us?